Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today we have a Titania 0 build. So the last attempt that I used Titania for kind of ended up, it was a good list, but it didn't really use Titania as the win condition as much as I would have liked. And so with Leech still being pretty prevalent in the meta, we are going to run a deck list that is okay if our abilities get canceled out. Actually, we prefer it. We're going to be running Titania 0, and this list moves more towards the older style of Zero deck list that uses an Enchantress. It uses Zero. In this one, we don't have a Venom, but if you don't have Luke Cage and you have Titania, you can take out Luke Cage for a Venom. You can consolidate your power into one lane. You might at that point take out Destroyer in favor of a Taskmaster to give yourself the upside from whatever lane you ended up venoming. Luke Cage is in here as a secondary way to kind of surprise the opponent. If they think that our Lizard is going to have a power reduction, if they see that Typhoid Mary is on the board, but they don't think we're running a Venom or that we don't have the capacity to drop a 4-power Enchantress and still be competitive in the other lanes, we can surprise them with a 2-cost Luke Cage instead. Now, I think this one would do pretty well even without Luke Cage, honestly, even without Titania, but what she does well is it gives us that extra flexibility. And so Zero is going to be great for targeting either an early Titania or Ebony Maw. You could target your Lizard, your Maximus, your Typhoid Mare, your Red Skull Destroyer. There are a lot of targets in this list that benefit from your Zero. And if you throw Titania onto the board, it's not the end of the world. If you can play around that location, it can make it kind of clunky for the opponent to play their cards, but it could also come back to bite you in the butt if they end up with the card and you don't have any space to play and you don't have any space to get it back, then you just gave them 5 power for free. And if you want to tweak this just a little bit, you can take out Typhoid Mary, you can put in Atuma instead, and that would take away the primary use for Luke Cage. Now, Luke Cage can offer some kind of niche flexibility in locations that negatively impact your card's power. So like Jotunheim, you can play your cards into that lane early, and then a Luke Cage will retroactively restore that power. But I wouldn't say he's core in this list by any means. The main idea is that you are focusing on Zero and taking away the negative abilities of your really high power cards, that they're really high power because they have those negative abilities. So if you can remove those in any way, shape, or form, then you get a lot more upside out of your gameplay and out of this list. And so overall, it's a pretty straightforward deck list. If you've seen any of the core Zero decks that were really prevalent a couple of seasons ago, then you should have a decent idea of how to navigate this one, but there are some kind of fine-tuning and niche decisions that were made to make this deck list possible. But we're going to go ahead and jump over into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so first up we have Tofu, and in our starting hand we have our Ebony Maw, we have our Luke Cage, and we have Maximus. The first location was Wakandan Embassy, so those first 3 cards get an even bigger bonus. Now, we are really hoping, actually, if we don't get Zero, then we can actually play Ebony Maw. We can actually play Ebony Maw on 3 into Clintar. It's a 1-cost card still, so it's just about the same thing. And then we could try to follow it up later with like an Armor or maybe a Cosmo. But we are going to go ahead and throw our Titania into Wakandan Embassy. Maybe we can end up capping out that location, make it a little bit clunky, and then have her return to us at the very end of the game. I like her in the aspect that she can be a control, like a boomerang, like a goblin that can return back to you. She is going to be great to be zeroed out because a 1-cost 5-power card is just phenomenal value. But if not, and it's actually after turn 4. I don't know why we had to play the Ebony Maw. That's okay. And so Titania does go to their side, and then with the Juggernaut, she comes back to ours. Our Luke Cage is going to get converted into a symbiote in the middle location, unfortunately. But it's okay. It could be worse. It definitely could be worse. We're going to go ahead and do Zero into a Maximus into the Wakandan Embassy lane. I think they will probably play a card into the... No, so they play one into the far right. Very interesting. I'm curious what they're playing. But we are going to bounce our Titanium back to our side. So now if they play any card at all into Wakandan Embassy, it will bounce over to their side. It will cap out the location. So they'll either have to play 2 or none, depending on what they draw into. And so we now have our Typhoid Mary, which is a little bit tough. We could follow that up with an Enchantress, but it's still not ideal. We're very susceptible in the middle location. We have a roving 5-powered unit in the far left. Not an ideal layout, but maybe we can find our win condition. If we end up getting armor next turn, we could drop that into the middle location to protect those cards, as well as Enchantressing our Typhoid Mary. It just really depends here. And so they snapped. We're gonna let it play out for now. So we do drop the Typhoid Mary. They drop a massive Devil Dino, which that is actually kind of beautiful, because we are going to be able to Enchantress the Devil Dino. If they play one card here, then that will bounce back to their side. They probably have one additional Devil Dino that they can play. And so let's play the Lizard into the left and the Enchantress into the far right. Now, the reason that I'm going to be doing that is I think if I was Tofu, I'm putting myself in their mind. If I was Tofu, I would play my Devil Dino here. And then I would play one card into the Wakandan Embassy to try to make sure that, that Titania bounces to my side. And so if I play a card, Lizard is going to bounce her their way, and then if they play a card, it will bounce it back. This could be the wrong read. Titania is going to be one of those cards that it can make or break some games. It's outplaying and outmaneuvering your opponent. And so they do drop one card. It could be maybe a leader play. Could it be a leader here? We are going to Enchantress the far right lane, and so we are okay there. If it is a leader in the Wakandan Embassy, then that actually won't copy our Lizard. No, it is a Devil Dino. And so that bounces our Titania back to our side. It gets us pretty close to winning that lane, but we win Clintar and Clintar for the 2-lane sweep. So Enchantress being added back into this deck list is going to come in very clutch in some matchups where they are getting kind of used to Enchantress having fallen out of the core 0 deck list, but we're adding her back in, and game number 1 was very, very beneficial. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, so next up we have Mantis. We do have our Ebony Maw. We also have armor, so we might drop armor, and then maybe our Ebony Maw on, 3. Maybe we just don't drop our Ebony Maw this game. It depends on what we draw into here. And so let's go ahead and protect the Fisk Tower lane. We're going to avoid the Lechugia until we just have to. Destroyer is going to be phenomenal in nowhere. And actually, let's go ahead and we're going to play our Maximus over there. Maybe we end up doing a Cosmo into Fisk Tower or a Cosmo into the Lechugia, followed by a Destroyer there. But I do like the layout of these locations. It makes it really hard for Leeches to be played, for Leaders to be played, for Galactus to be played. And so we're going to be able to restrict 2 of the 3 locations for them. And we have some cards that synergize very well with not being able to use their own reveal abilities. And so the Maximus comes down as a massive 3-cost drop. We now have Titania. And so we could do Titania and Cosmo. And they did ramp up. So they have 5 energy here. I don't know, but I'm feeling like it's going to be a Professor X. And I don't think they'll drop it into Fisk Tower. I think if they drop a Professor X, they're going to drop it into the Lechugia. And with the way that Professor X works, we're going to drop Cosmo, and then we're going to drop Titania afterwards. That way she stays on our side of the board. Professor X will come down, we'll lock down the location, and she shouldn't be able to switch sides. But that's the read I'm going with. No, they play over into Fisk Tower, so the snap was not what I thought. They do ramp into an early Leech is what they were going for, but that's okay. That actually allows us to use our Ebony Maw. That allows us to do a Destroyer on 6 without any kind of worry about where we played at. So we do get quite a bit of benefit here. Let's go ahead and do an Ebony Maw into the middle location because we're probably not going to draw any great cards next turn. Let's see if we can position our cards to find a good play order. Now, if they play a leader on the final turn, then that's going to copy our Destroyer, but we're looking to have initiative in all of the other lanes leading into that last turn. And so we're going to go ahead and play our 0, our Luke Cage, our Ebony Maw, and then we're just looking for that Destroyer on the final turn. So we do send a Titania their way. They play a card into the Lechugia, which does send it back our way, which actually that could be... Okay, no, it's a wave. It's interesting. It could have been a Professor X, and I think it would have stayed on their side. I don't know for sure. But what I do know is that we have a really big lead here. They can't do a leader play here to bounce Titania to their side. We have a really big lead, or a decently big lead in nowhere. We're going to drop our massive destroyer into Fisk Tower, and I think we can find our 8 cube win condition. I don't know what they are playing with the wave. Don't think they can impact all 3 lanes, and so they do end up retreating. We do lock in the 4 cube win condition, where they thought the Leech was going to be their win condition, but this list, it wants people to play Leech. That allowed us to do our massive Ebony Maw that was stuck in our hand. It allowed us to do a destroyer that had no negative downside to it. And so while Leech is in the meta, abuse a 0 list if you can. You don't necessarily have to have Luke Cage. He's just kind of an added bonus. You don't necessarily have to have Titania. You could go with the older 0 list that runs the Enchantress, and I think it'll do just fine. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Art. And the first location is Shadowland. We have armor to protect and make sure that those ninjas don't go anywhere if it looks like they might run a Killmonger. If we can draw into a 0, we can 0 out our Ebony Maw. We have a couple of kind of flexible ways that we can play this. We're going to go ahead and throw armor. We do have both Typhoid Mary and Luke Cage. So we're going to be able to throw the Typhoid Mary and then surprise them with getting that power back onto our cards or into the board. I'm going to go ahead and do Ebony Maw into Clintar, and then we're going to do Luke Cage into the X Mansion. Clintar, we're not going to be able to play anything for turn 4, but after that, Ebony Maw will turn into a symbiote, and we'll be able to play there again. And so they play Thor into Shadowland, so that's going to be a pretty big, potentially pretty big resource for them. We pull into a Mantis. They pull into a Brood, which is a lot of board space, to say the very least. Let's go ahead and do our Typhoid Mary into the X-Mansion lane. Next turn, we can end up going with a Cosmo into Clintar. I think that is where they would probably play... I think that's where they would probably play their Mjolnir if they draw into one. And so let's go ahead and do that. We have the Typhoid Mary. We're not going to get the negative downside of her ongoing ability because of Luke Cage. If they Enchantress one, they're going to Enchantress both. And so we're okay with that as well. Or if we Enchantress it, I guess, as well. They do a White Queen, which is going to draw into either our Cosmo or our Maximus. Either one is absolutely fine. They have 2 board spaces here. We're going to play the bounce game with them. Go ahead and do Cosmo into Titania into 0. 0 over here. That way 0 can trigger. We will have the flexibility to do a Maximus somewhere next turn. We can try to out-position ourselves with the Titania. And in Clintar, it is going to bounce over to their side. They did end up retreating as soon as they saw the Cosmo. I assume this was maybe a Wong, maybe this was Mjolnir, and they realized they weren't going to have enough board space to make their big pushes happen. And so let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, so next up we have the Lechu Gia. And so we're probably going to avoid playing there for quite a while, if not the entire game, until like our very last turn. They play a Nightcrawler, and then the middle location turns into Kunlun. So they're not going to be able to get the extra upside on their Nightcrawler here. So we're going to hit them with the old shocked emote. We're going to skip on turn 2. We have the Maximus if we want to. They're running the Nightcrawler Daredevil, so it looks like the Devil Dino control list that we featured a little bit earlier today. So we could do a Maximus to force them to draw into additional cards. I think for now, let's just go with a Lizard and an Ebony Maw. That's going to make it hard for them to lock down this location. And so then if they're going to look for a way to lock down a lane with Professor X on the final turn, they're going to have to work very, very hard for it. And then 11 power in Kiln is going to be hard for them to beat. So let's go ahead and lock that in for now. We have... Okay, so they do a Scorpion, which is not quite enough. That is a pretty big power push, but we of course can't play over there this turn. So we can do a Typhoid Mary. That's going to make it hard for them to lock this one down with a Professor X on 5 if that's what they're angling for. Either that, or we could angle for a Cosmo play. But I do think we go Typhoid Mary, and then on turn 5, since they'll be able to see what we're playing, I think we position our Maximus over here. Now, they actually extend the amount of time that they can play into this location. And so we're going to go ahead and play a Cosmo and a Luke Cage if they want to do a Professor X. It's not going to be enough to win them the lane here. It's not going to be enough to win them the lane here or here. And so they're going to have to do something different. We're going to go ahead and snap. Hopefully they stay. We're going to snap before we lock in our turn, just because I'm pretty confident in kind of what they're running. Maybe they run a leech. That would be probably the ideal scenario here. If they run a leech, then we're going to be able to do our destroyer without any kind of drawback or worry or concern. Otherwise, we have to look at doing like a Maximus here, or if we win the flooded lane, maybe we just do our destroyer here and we don't have to worry about it. And so they do drop one card into mid. It could be a Devil Dino, and then maybe they're angling to do a leader on the no, it is a leech. Thank you very much for your fantastic contribution. So now if they're running an arrow, doesn't really benefit them all that much here. If they're running a leader, they have to play it here. Ooh, but if they're running... Ooh, do they go wide? If they go wide, it's fine too. If they do a Dr. Doom, that wins them this lane, but they lose this one because of the destroyer, and they also lose this one. Do they have the Shang-Chi counter? That wouldn't win them the middle location either. I think we're overthinking this. We're just going to go ahead and lock it in. This looks like a pretty standard leech into leader style deck, or leech into an arrow play, and if they want to drop the leader, they have to play it here, and they're not going to have enough space to copy anything. They could move their Nightcrawler though, but if they move their Nightcrawler out, that doesn't win them the far right, it doesn't win them the far left. We could lock in the destroyer in mid, and they would copy our destroyer, but we'd still have the win condition on them. It would bring them down to, because it would bring them down to 5, the leader would bring them up to 9, and so then even though they copied our power, it wouldn't be enough. And so they do end up retreating. That is exactly what we want to see with a 0 deck list, is a lot of leeches. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Burke. And in our starting hand, we have our 0. The far left location is Fisk Tower. So it's going to destroy anything that's moved over into that location. And then we get Shuri's Lab, which is going to, when you play a card there, it's going to double that power, which offers us quite a bit of flexibility. And part of me wants to play 0 this turn into a next turn Maximus, but I'm going to wait. We're going to wait. We're going to look to see a little bit more about what is played, and then we're going to kind of go from there. The far left lane is Monster Metropolis. We can go ahead and do Lizard into 0. Both of those will be doubled. Next turn, we could do a Typhoid Mary into Monster Metropolis, or we can do a Maximus into Monster Metropolis. That's going to be a pretty big power push without any downside. They run a Forge, and so we'll have to look into what they're buffing up. If we draw into a Cosmo, we probably play it into Shuri's Lab to protect ourselves from any kind of like Shang-Chi plays or anything similar. But let's go ahead and do Typhoid Mary into Fisk Tower. We could do Maximus into Monster Metropolis, but I think we're going to hold off for now, just in case they buffed something up. So they do use a Carnage and a Forge, and the Carnage gets buffed up by the Forge so that it starts a little bit higher. They use Scarlet Witch on the right, and so after turn 3, since it's after 3, we don't have to worry about it. How do we want to play this? We don't have a Cosmo. We can't do anything big over here. We could do a Red Skull into Fisk Tower. We could do a Red Skull into Shuri's Lab. We could do an Enchantress here, but I think they probably have a Shang-Chi that they throw at us. So let's go ahead and split our difference. We're going to do Red Skull into the Fisk Tower, and then we'll look for our win condition after that. We're going to see what they play here. They did snap into this turn, so they have a Mr. Sinister, which is going to be 2 2-power cards, which is not phenomenal, into a Mojo, which is also not phenomenal. We can do our Enchantress into a Titania, but if they play one card here, our Titania will bounce onto their side of the board, which is definitely not what we want. Do we think they play anything into the Atilan location this turn? I think they probably play a Shang-Chi somewhere, maybe something else. I don't know. If they play a card here, the Titania is going to be a roving bullet that's going to give them the win condition. If not, it's going to be a massive 1-power play on our end. We're just going to hope. We're going to hope, okay, we don't see anything in Fisk Tower. That's phenomenal. We do have the Titania. They do just play the Shang-Chi into the far left lane. So we keep our win condition in Shuri's lab. We find our win condition from the cheap but powerful Titania card in the Atilan location, and we're able to lock down and secure the 4-cube victory. And with that one, we are going to go ahead and end the video here. So in contrast to our video from yesterday that ends in a lot of 2-cube games and they don't go the full extent of the 6 turns, this one is almost the opposite. These almost always go the full extent of the game because up until that last turn, a lot of times the opponent doesn't know exactly what you're going to be playing. If this deck becomes more common, I think we'll see a reduction in the amount of games that go the entire distance. But at least for now, I am collecting a decent amount of cubes. I'm going to use this for a little while and see if I can get up to 90 on our alternate account. We are almost at 83. And eventually we will push for infinite on both our primary and secondary accounts. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. And as always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.